All right, so here we are, episode 4 of The View from 32, 1932 Criterion Theatre podcast. We're really happy to have Peter Lindquist with us. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we've had 3 of these that we've done, and it's been really fun. It's been really cool to talk to everybody, and really happy to have you here, taking some time out of your day to chat with us for a bit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've seen 2 of the episodes, and
Okay, good.
I'm very impressed. And you know, good choice as a musician and nice work on the
Well,
on the show.
that's Chuck. Chuck has been getting some great people in here, so we're really grateful for him and the work he's been doing too. So it's been really fun. And I'm usually not one to be on camera as much, but I've been enjoying chatting with everybody, and it doesn't really feel as much like a shoot as more of a conversation. So it's cool.
But you play too, right?
I do, yeah. I'm a musician, and my wife is a musician, and we don't as much anymore, but we write and record and all that, and it's fun. Yeah, we enjoy it. Have you, speaking of writing and recording, have you been doing anything with music during this?
Well, you know, everything is it feels like an extension of winter for me.
I
You
totally
know, you
get
close
that.
up and you do your winter work. For me, it was projects like I'll show you these records in a
Sure.
minute. But you know, for a few years, I'd do some kind of a recording and writing project over the winter. And this year, I thought I would do something like that, but I also got started on kind of wood shedding. I'd hit a couple of brick walls in my technique, and I have no illusions about being a hot bluegrass picker, but the technique is real good for you.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, I started woodshedding that a lot, which meant like, you know, totally admitting that my right hand sucks and I got to start over.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, the extension's been helpful because I'm back to being able to play coherently the way I want to play instead of the way I used to play. So it's getting there, but
Yeah.
you know, it's almost a blessing to have this time, because the weirdest thing about it has been not knowing what to plan for.
Of course,
You know,
yeah.
if you know what's coming, you can say, "Fine, I'll."
Cool, in 6 months I'll line some shows up.
Yeah.
But we don't even know that.
Or I'll work up a visual show, or I'll
Right.
work up an album, but we don't know. And to be honest with you, the only way to make your money back on making records at our level is live shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, I don't think I've seen a penny of streaming money for an album that Gus and I did probably 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It just doesn't come. It just isn't there.
It's true, and it's totally, you know, it's weirder now because of Spotify and Amazon Music and all the things that, you know, it's not people just purchasing your album and it's a $9 download and then you get $7 or whatever it is. Streaming, not a whole lot of people even know how it really works in the back end, and so, yeah, you never really know what's going on.
You never know what's going on in the fractions. I mean, you know, major songwriters are getting checks for $12.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so you know, that's not the way to go. And I think more and more people are just saying, well, it would be great to be heard the way you get heard when you stream, but if there's no money in it and there is no money coming later from it,
Right.
why?
And especially right now, it's even if they do hear on a streaming platform and they're like, oh, this person's great, I'd love to book them. Oh, wait, I can't. So then you got really nothing coming out of it. So it's true.
Right. So Gus and I did all the platforms, you know, iTunes, CD Baby, Spotify, who knows, I can't even remember the list. And then Bobby and I said, nope, direct sales only.
Yeah.
And I have a fantasy that somehow a group of musicians or a well-established musician or some other philanthropist might put together a server to do what Spotify does, but instead of using the music is not what Spotify's there for. It's just to get people to click
Of course.
and see the ads.
Yep.
So what they're really doing is selling your butt in a seat for their ad space.
Right.
And wouldn't it be great if you could click on a similar service and actually have the musicians get some of that money?
Right.
You know?
Right. And that would be a nice thing to see because it's hard work. It really is to pour yourself into writing, to find, buy, have the gear, rent the gear to record, to go through the process of mixing, mixing, mastering, all that, and then you put it out, and like you said, you're getting, you know, $10, and it's like, well, okay.
Yeah. I mean, when Bobby did her episode, she made a great point, and that is, there's a wonderful moment of interaction when somebody says, I like your stuff. Can I buy it? And you make the exchange. It's a nice moment, you know, and you just don't get that with the anonymous click.
You don't.
And you get all the money.
I remember when I was a kid, your favorite band would be dropping a new album, and this is really before iTunes and Spotify and all this. And the only way to do it was to go to Walmart, and hopefully it's not sold out, and you find it, and you're like, yes, here it is, and it felt so good.
Yeah.
And you just don't get that anymore.
I mean, for me, growing up, I played my first gig in '68, I think. You know, so I was a little kid, 11, 12 years old, but that gives you the time frame. So back when I started playing, you could buy an album in mono or pay an extra $1.50 and get it in stereo.
Yeah.
But whenever a new album came out, we'd run home and we'd look at the liner notes and the album cover and listen to the record twice through.
Yep.
It was always at least twice through, and you studied every scribble on the coat.
Well,
cover.
and that's the other thing that's cool about records is like actual records and my wife and I that's one of the more hipster things we do now is we really like
it's a
records.
I approve of.
I know it's cool, and kudos to the hipsters for bringing that back. But it kind of allows you to listen to the album the way the artist wanted you to listen to the album, not just scrolling through a list of songs and clicking on one.
Absolutely.
You listen to every track and the flow of the music and how it was written and how it was recorded, and it's just cool. And I think a lot of that's being lost with the digital era.
I think a lot of things get lost in the digital era. For one thing, studio time used to be real expensive.
Yep.
And when we'd go into the studio, we would be really practiced up. Mm-hmm. And then we could relax and enjoy the place.
Right.
But it could eat you alive if you weren't ready.
Yeah.
And I think that produced some happy accidents.
Yeah, totally.
And some cool energy on records.
It's true.
And then again, engineers really were engineers.
Yeah.
I mean, in England, they wore lab coats.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and now for $1,000 and a laptop, you're now a record producer, and
exactly.
It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great because it's allowing more artists to, be able to make their art. However, it kind of lessens the professionalness of it.
I think, just change is inevitable.
Of course.
And one of the inevitable victims of change are the margins, are the people at the margins. And as a musician, when synthesizers came out, horn players lost some work. Mm-hmm. But the really good horn players worked.
Yep.
Because there's a big difference between a good horn player and a synth line.
It's true.
And so, it is harsh. A lot of people, I knew a bunch of engineers, they couldn't make the money work because the equipment's expensive, the location's expensive,
it is.
Heating and cooling is expensive because it has to be noiseless. Everything about their business was expensive, and it is a shame that I think quite a few did go out of business.
Yeah.
Had they been able to hold out, the world would have heard what a home-produced record sounds like as compared to the work they were doing.
It's true. It's true. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I was a studio music production guy in college for 2 years. I was with mechanical engineering first, and then I was like, I don't want to be a mechanical engineer.
Right.
And I switched to audio engineering, and I loved it, and it was amazing. And then I did a few records for people and producing and engineering them, and I liked it. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know that I love working with musicians in the studio, like in this kind of capacity. And that's coming from a musician, and I think it was a little bit more challenging because I would hear things and I'm like, ooh, we should try this, but you have to kind of back off a little bit because it's their song, and
the creative process is fragile.
It is. It really is. That's their baby. Their song is their baby, and you don't want to tell someone else what to do. And like you said, I could kind of see, it was going to be harder and harder and harder to be able to charge people for studio time when with a laptop and GarageBand, you can go record your little acoustic EP and it's fine.
And, the gear is good, so if you're smart enough to leave everything flat, it's going to sound pretty okay to start with.
Yeah.
It's not like the old days where you really had to,
like recording to 2-inch tape on an old SSL console.
Yeah, my first home studio was a it was marketed as a stereo machine, but it was really a 2-track.
Yeah.
And it was unusual. It was a little Sony machine, but instead of one record for right and left going forward and one for backwards or for the other side, this was separate switches.
Oh,
so I
nice.
could overdub without any time loss because it was cheap enough that it didn't have that extra head that caused the time glitch. So I would do sound on sound in my little,
That's
it was
awesome.
basically a converted closet.
Sure. Yeah.
And, the beauty of it was such cheap gear.
Yeah.
that it didn't know better.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. It's weird, always weird to see, the evolution of, and my wife does photography. And so looking at, everyone's a photographer now because they have an iPhone in their pocket and
Right.
Instagram, which is cool because it allows everyone to, create. But at the same time, it kind of, if you say you're a photographer now, it's like, oh, well, everyone's a photographer. And if you say you're a record producer, it's like, oh, well, everyone kind of is.
Yeah, but the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, how do the pictures
Very true.
look? How does
Very
the
true.
record sound?
Yep.
Is it selling? Are they,
It's very true. Well, and that's the thing. And it's funny because she shoots a lot of film still with an old Canon 35 millimeter film camera.
Yeah.
And that's starting to come back too. And it's just cool you can edit a picture, a digital picture for an hour and still not have it look as good as a film image. It's so cool. It's so cool.
I did some photography back in the dark ages, and the darkroom work was half of the fun.
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah,
It was really,
totally. Well, speaking of, photography, other things, what else, what other career paths have you done? Anything
okay.
exciting that you want to chat about?
let me see. My life has been spent largely here, in and out, from childhood until I was about 19.
Okay.
And I started playing out when I was 19. I played a few places in town. Ryan's Pub is where the tailgate is now.
Nice.
Jetty's was just a basement joint, and a guy named Jerry owned it still. And it was a dump. It was so cool. It was great. He had an upright piano in the basement, no PA, no nothing, just a desk lamp on the upright. And if you played there, you didn't get much if you got
Yeah.
any money, but you got a few drinks. And I was underage, and that sounded good to me.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
I used to play there, and one time, one of my sisters came to the gig. Waved the flag a little bit.
Yeah.
We were teenagers, and this guy that was interested in her was trying to impress her. And so I go out on a break, just in time to watch this guy get 86. He's drunk and he's rowdy and he's big and he's being obnoxious, so they throw him out. And he gets mad and he goes up to his truck and he picks up this big old chainsaw.
Oh, geez.
And big old husky or something. He's got this thing roaring on the street, and he starts to go to town on the basement doorway. And he's really just trying to make noise and create hell.
Sure.
If he'd wanted to hurt that door, he would have been
Yeah.
more efficient, probably. But it was just the best scene. Meanwhile, this guy's trying to impress my sister. He's going, yeah, that's a Triumph. You can always tell the Triumph by the way. I always was amused by that because I was getting to see what it really was.
Yeah. He wanted to be Mr. Cool
Yeah.
motorcycle guy.
And Jetty, the owner, was a legend. I won't go into his stories. There are enough other people telling that.
Sure.
So anyway, I found that it was a pretty meager living.
Yeah.
Trying to make money in the 70s in this region as a musician. And so I went west.
Okay.
And circuitous route.
With plans or just
No, I
pack
just
up and
bailed.
go?
I decided I bailed out of college, and that meant bailing out of home.
Sure.
And so I went first as far as Wisconsin, and I was in a bluegrass duo.
Okay.
And it was a great experience. I got to play in situations I never would have. I backed up my partner in the National Flat Picking Championships
Awesome.
the year that Mark O'Connor won. Years later, his accompanist became one of my closest friends.
See, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Yes,
circles.
yeah.
And
Love
then I ended up on a schooner.
Okay.
The schooner Western Union was some folks I met had bought it out of storage, and it used to tend the cable. It ran down from Miami to Cuba.
Okay.
And then after the Bay of Pigs, they had to pull the plug on the project. So they put it in storage, and we bought it from them cheap, and fixed it up.
Nice.
And then things happened on that, and it didn't seem to be such a good situation anymore. So I ended up moving to California to start a band,
Okay.
and ended up taking it on the road for a number of years.
Very nice.
And we didn't make any records ourselves, but we backed other people on records, and we toured constantly.
Yeah.
Played 48 weeks a year usually.
Oh, wow.
It was, and if you're out there, you might as well be playing.
Oh,
So
sure. Yeah.
it was.
That's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of traveling.
It was never less, or never fewer than 5 nights a week. I wouldn't think.
Wow.
And but you get good.
Yeah.
Or you get tight with each other if
Yes.
you don't get good.
Yep.
And that was great. So anyway, I did that, and then I backed into, ended up in Tucson, Arizona. And they've got a great music scene there, really good.
That is one of
Like-
the few. I've never been to Tucson. I've been to Arizona, but I've never been to Tucson.
Well, it's real different from Phoenix, for example.
Yeah.
It's a lot looser. Frankly, I think it's warmer, more interesting.
Yeah.
And the music scene is really good. One of the nice things about this area is the musicians are good to each other.
Yeah. We have a really good musical community, artistic community here. It's
I think so,
like
too.
none other.
Mutual
really.
respect,
Mhm.
mutual aid. I
Yeah.
remember a while back there was a guy who ran into some hard times, and everybody chipped in to get him enough gear to keep playing.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing happens a lot here, and that was the way it was in Tucson. So we had a lot of fun with that.
That's cool.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I was selling musical equipment in Tucson and in Mexico.
Okay.
And we had a little shop that I managed in northern Mexico,
All right.
because we had all these customers coming over from Mexico to buy gear, and we said,
It's
well,
just like,
maybe we
why
should
don't
go
we just
down
go
there
down-
and see
Yeah.
if anybody wants to buy it from us down there.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting project, and it somehow led me to the field of translation and interpreting.
Okay. Cool.
And then that led me to a 10, 15-year career in academia,
All right.
writing books on and teaching interpreting
Wow.
and translation.
So what languages do you speak?
Well, my main languages are English and Spanish.
Spanish, okay.
There's some French. There's
Gotcha.
always been French, in
Yeah.
my life. But up to an academic level, my Spanish, although it came after the French, got way better than the French. So
Gotcha.
French is by far a third language.
Yeah.
And when you do it at the research level, a lot of it's theoretical stuff. So
Sure.
specific language groups are, for instance, rather than
Sure.
here's the theory and here's an example.
Right.
So that with my research work, I I worked on trying to figure out when it is and when it isn't a good interpretation. Because let's
Gotcha.
say I speak Spanish and you don't,
Right.
and I'm speaking and the interpreter is telling you what I just said. Maybe he's right.
Oh,
Maybe
gotcha.
he's wrong. You don't know.
Gotcha. And
I
that,
speak Spanish. I don't know what he's saying in English well enough to know if he's doing a good job.
and that could cause
Oh,
serious
people
problems.
go to jail over stuff, mistaken impressions, And
Like,
so I
hey,
used-
can I borrow your car? No. Okay, cool, thanks.
yeah. Do you mind if I?
Yeah.
Because of the no answer.
Oh, yeah.
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 But I mean, that wouldn't happen in court. But
Right.
that's the kind of miscommunication that happens.
Yeah.
Great story. I used to mix sound for festivals,
Mm-hmm.
and one of those things happened in English to English. The guy goes, "No monitor," and I say, "No monitor," meaning you don't want any monitor, and he says, "No monitor," and so I take him out of the monitor, and now he's got really no
Yeah.
monitor. And
That's what he said.
yeah. We figured it out.
Yeah.
But the point is, those kind of miscommunications happen
Totally.
inside one language. Imagine crossing two, in some
Oh,
cases three.
yeah. Totally.
So it's an interesting and important field.
That's
and
cool.
I was real excited about it, enjoyed it, ended up teaching it at the, doctoral and graduate level.
Yeah. Wow.
And then the meltdown came home, and I had a chance to come home, so here I am.
Very nice.
Yeah, and I'd much, that was good. It was great. It was fulfilling.
Yeah, of
It
course.
wasn't music.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
No, I really do get that. Music is something that, if you're passionate about it, and honestly, any sort of passion, if you're passionate about something, you just keep going back to it. You can't stay away.
Because if you're doing something else instead, you're going to make yourself nuts about it.
Mhm.
It-
It's true.
You
It's
know.
so true. So in terms of music, who would you look at as an artist and say, I want to. This is the person I want to be like. Your influences.
Well, I'm not sure I want to be like.
Okay.
You know, at another point in my life, I think I did.
Sure.
You know, at this point, I keep thinking, you know, one of these days I'm going to find out who I am.
Yeah.
But
That's the big mystery, I guess. Yeah.
But earliest on, my oldest brothers are 10 years older than I.
Okay.
So I was exposed to Elvis and Ricky Nelson and the Everly Brothers.
Okay.
And some really cool, really obscure country, you know, Farron Young and you know, the real Hank Williams.
Okay. Yeah.
And all that from as far back as I can remember. And I'm from a big family. We're pretty eclectic musically, so the tastes got broadened from there.
Sure.
And then when the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers came out, and you know, Graham Parsons, Clarence White was the lead guitar player for the Byrds for a number of years, and also played with Graham Parsons. His real name was Clarence LeBlanc from Lewiston,
Oh, wow.
and he became, many think, the world's top bluegrass guitar player. And he was a Lewiston boy.
Actually, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But anyway, the Flying Burrito Brothers was a band that Graham Parsons was in for a number of years.
Okay. I don't think I've ever even heard. I need to
Well,
look them up.
do yourself a favor and look him up. He
Yeah.
didn't write
Even
a
based
whole
on the
ton.
name. That's a
Yeah, well,
good name.
You would never have had the Eagles. You would never have had all kinds of really big groups
Yeah.
if they were sort of the musician's musician version of that music that the Eagles later came out with.
Gotcha.
You know, maybe a little rough around the edges.
Yeah,
maybe
the less
too many
marketed
ideas in
and
the
polished.
arrangement. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really good, really sincere stuff. And Graham Parsons started, or at least exposed, my generation to country music and thereby country rock.
Yeah.
And you know, but then on the other hand, you had John Fogerty, you know,
Yeah.
Creedence doing another kind of what became country rock.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's, you know, that was huge. And so all that, and then of course the Grateful Dead. That was my first really big concert.
Yeah. Very nice.
With the New Riders, and Jerry Garcia was playing steel for the Riders, so that was an event to catch. And then a lot of bluegrass guys. When I was about 19, I was tagging along with a bluegrass band who was doing the warm-up act for Doc Watson.
Okay.
And they got there, and Doc Watson showed up and said, the PA is inadequate. You don't have enough inputs for the whole band. We simply cannot perform. We'd love to, but there's no way we can do it. And the guys I was hanging out with took what we used to call a Shure vocal masher. It was a terrible sounding PA, but it's the one everybody had. And they had one in the back of the tour bus, so for just in case, and rehearsal and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it only had 4 inputs, and I went out and counted them, and I counted what the house had, and I went and tugged Doc Watson's sleeve, and I said, "Hey, if I could cob together a system that let you plug everybody in, are you up for playing?" And he said, "Hell, that's what we came for."
Yeah.
So I ran out, and I think I put what they each did was they ran a cheesy little piezoelectric pickup on each guitar. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's about what there was in those days.
Mm.
And I ran that through the vocal masher. And then their mics, they had, they also wanted to run direct mics. You know, run mics to each guitar so to improve on that tinny little sound.
Sure.
And then have some vocals. And there were just exactly enough channels to do it. And the guitars, the tinny guitar pickups went through the tinny system,
Yep.
and the better stuff went through the better rig. And to thank me for it, he invited me backstage between shows, and he had, you know, an hour and a half intermission. And we drank coffee and played guitars.
That's awesome.
It was the coolest thing. Him and his son Merle in the band, and they were just really good guys.
That's
really,
so cool.
Yeah.
It's cool for, you know, I mean, you're just a kid. I mean, really.
Yeah.
And so that was probably such a cool experience. I mean, obviously you've never forgotten about
Decades
that.
later,
and
I'm telling the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's so cool that
Yeah.
he was cool, you know, to, you know, as a kid that you know, a fan that wanted to
Yeah.
hang out with him, and that's awesome.
And then the 2 other aspects of music that deserve mention are the band and Little Feat. You know, 2, again, groups of kind of musicians that were huge in their time, which I recognize as having been before yours. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
they were super influential on the music scene because they were smart music. You know what I mean? They thought about what they were recording.
Right, exactly.
And it made a nice contrast to the other stuff that it was up against.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I'd be interested to, in 20 years from now, to hear the answer that somebody would give as to like who their musical influences are. Because I mean, right now it's getting harder and harder to find newer bands coming out that are actually using instruments. Everything's a techno machine and like EDM stuff, and so it's harder to find bands now.
Yeah, wouldn't you? I mean, I kind of think that maybe that's because or that is the reason behind the resurgence in acoustic music and stripped down. The one mic.
And there's lots of it. I'm super into all that stuff. I love it.
Well, I used to sell synthesizers when they were new on the market, affordable. It used to be they cost as much as a house, and the memory bank was the size of a bank.
Right.
And I used to sell them, and so I'd play them, and I go, okay, I got this really cool fiddle sound. I got this really cool mandolin sound. I got this cool banjo sound. Why don't I just play the mandolin or the banjo or the guitar? You know, I finally got fed up with faking it because it was a silly game. There was no point in making them sound great as acoustic instruments when there's still acoustic instruments.
Right. Right. No, I'm the same way. Yeah, I love just, like you said, real stripped down, raw, just acoustic music. It's super relaxing. It's, actually artistic and musical. Which, and again, don't get me wrong, I do like some of the stuff, the new age stuff that's a little bit more, electronic driven.
It's a groove, right?
Yeah, it's super catchy. It's really well produced.
Right.
And I can appreciate all that. Honestly, there isn't really a type of music that I'm like, I don't like that type of music, because I can appreciate it all.
We get tribal about our music.
It's true.
But
it's
aside
so true.
from that, I'm with you. Anything that's well played is good music.
Yeah. Yeah. I can respect any kind of music because any kind of music takes skill.
When I was a younger guy, I know that I marked out my turf by what I hated.
Yeah.
I was like, what? How self-defeating can
I know.
could that have been? But it's true. It's how you showed, and I have to admit, I still won't play American Pie. I know I should.
That's fair. That's fair.
I know it would be bigger of me to do it. But,
you got to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's
I
cool.
got to be small somehow. I got plenty of ways of being small, but I got to make sure.
I understand. So, what's your process like when you write? Are you a sit down and plan out a session kind of guy, or is it just things come to you and you run it and write it down and play it real quick?
Pretty varied.
Okay.
Pretty varied. Sometimes, well, one of the songs I'm going to do later, because I think my wife said don't, because she thinks it's too sad, but it's got a happy ending.
I love sad songs, so
me too.
it's
Who
perfect.
doesn't, right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
So anyway, that song came to me, I think I had just put the kids to bed, it was getting to be time to think about, like, dragging out a book and chilling myself. And a couple of lines came to me, and they came to me with sort of a melodic idea. So you got to get that started. And then I'd been playing with these chord ideas, just stuff that made sense but isn't typical of, what we were hearing.
Yeah.
So a couple of cool chord changes came to me at that time, and I just couldn't put it down until it was done. And, 4 hours later or something, I really did have a completed song.
Yeah.
But usually it takes more struggle. Usually I'll have I've got this one song I've been working on forever. I've got pages of notes on what the verses might be.
Yep.
But I got a killer chorus.
Yeah. Honestly, that's one of the hardest parts, is because you got to sing it 3-4 times sometimes, and so it's got to be good.
Yeah, but it's no good to you until you get something else to go with
Also
it.
true. Also true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be, sometimes it comes to me almost formed, but that's rare.
Yeah.
There's a song I tried to dredge up enough lyrics, and it's been too long since I did it. I couldn't do it today, but I wrote about leaving here when I was 19. And
Recently you wrote about it,
no,
or
I
was
wrote
this
it
an
back
older
then,
one? Okay.
And it popped into
Wow.
my head the other day, but it didn't pop in with enough of the
Yeah.
material
Yeah.
to try to pull it off on tape. But So yeah, it's pretty eclectic, and I like all kinds of music, and I enjoy playing all kinds of music.
Yeah.
I play a bunch of instruments. And
So are you guitar, mandolin, banjo?
bass, harmonica, some Spanish folkloric instruments,
Okay.
bandurria and laúd,
Okay.
and
Whatever you can,
piano,
whatever
and I
you
don't
can
know what
learn.
else.
Yeah.
There are others. I don't have the independence to play percussion.
Yeah.
I'm just one of those guys that I
Yeah,
leave that to somebody else.
I always think I'm a good drummer until I start drumming because I can like do a beat and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, ask my wife about that. She'll laugh at me because I'm like, yeah, I can play the drums, and then I start drumming and I'm like, yeah, I can't play the drums.
Not me. I play a lot with a guy named Nathan Grant. He's one of those
Okay.
guys you want to punch him because he can sit down and do anything beautifully.
Yep.
But he can just sit down as comfortably behind the drums as any other instrument. And to me, it's a totally different beast.
It is. It's completely different. It really is.
But so I do that, and one of my projects was I multi-tracked an album, a CD, and played all the different parts on it.
Yeah.
And since I spent a lot of time in Arizona, and I used to live in Mexico, and I used to live in Spain, people often call me Pedro, or Pedro really, but Pedro. So I put out this thing under Los Pedros,
Okay. Nice.
Paydrows, to gringofy it good and hard. And then the name of it was At Least I've Got Each Other.
Okay, that's good.
So,
Yeah.
Never did get along with the bass player. That guy was a jerk in that band. Yeah. I played all the instruments, but that bass player on top.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But, to me, I don't play them all particularly well. I play some better, noticeably better than others.
Is
But-
guitar probably like your main
Yeah.
thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say guitar is, and I like dobro a lot.
Okay. Awesome. Can't
but-
say that I've ever tried that one.
Oh, it's a really expressive instrument. You can get cool stuff out
That's
of
cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
it.
Cool.
But anyway, I think you get to a point where the instrument itself is not as important as it being simply a means to hear what is rattling around in your head.
Right.
So producing other people playing or playing all the parts myself is not all that different. Obviously I didn't come up with each of their parts,
Right.
but in my head it's still just taking the elements and making sure that they form a coherent whole.
Right.
And that's what you
Exactly.
do when you sit down with one guitar or a full, production
Exactly.
rig.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's all. The same we just said is true of styles. You could call it jazz, but if you listen to stuff like Jerry Douglas, he's an acoustic guy. Most people call him bluegrass or alternative bluegrass.
Yeah.
But he's got stuff that's out there jazz.
Yeah.
Way swinging hard jazz.
Yeah.
And he's doing it on bluegrass instruments. But where do you draw the lines between one label and another?
Right.
Anyway,
Well, it's true. And speaking of styles, I've never really gotten super into the bluegrass scene in terms of like listening to music. Some of the, the mainstream stuff, Nickel Creek back in the day,
Yeah,
I really
sure.
liked them a lot. But there's a band that a buddy of mine introduced me to called the Cleverleys, and I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah, I'll
But
tell you why I know of them. Yeah.
They're hilarious. For those that don't know, they do like newer songs, super bluegrass style, like rap songs
And they
and
take
stuff.
their name from the Everly Brothers, which is a particular kind of harmony.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's so cool, and I just love that style where they take these, like they do a flow ride a song and just make it super bluegrass, and yeah, look them up because they're funny.
There was a band. There was a band called Run CNW.
Run CNW.
Yeah, and it was top bluegrass guys with a fairly obscure but wonderful songwriter named Russell Smith, died
Okay.
last year, doing most of the singing. But these were bluegrass legends in the band, and they would do goof parodies of songs everybody knew
Okay.
with bluegrass instruments.
Gotcha.
Purple hay up in my barn, that sort of thing. Frankly, it got obnoxious
Yeah,
after a
oh,
while.
yeah.
You can't listen to it two sides
No,
in a row.
no, you can't.
But it's
It-
great for a chuckle,
Yeah, exactly.
And then the musicianship was scary good.
Yeah, and see, that's what's so cool about especially bluegrass musicians. They're some of the best at playing with a band, some of the tightest musicians.
It's all about collaboration.
It's beautiful. It's amazing. It really is.
Well, it's a super disciplined bunch. They're so disciplined they can be loose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they all seem to be like that together, and it just is so cohesive.
Part of that discipline is you just never, ever step on anybody else ever for anything.
Yeah.
So if it's somebody else's moment, your whole gig is to give them that boost.
Yeah.
And that's all you're there for.
Yep.
And then when it's your moment, you got all these guys just giving you a boost.
Yeah.
And it's the nicest feeling in the world.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're all just thinking like one, if you can. And every band tries to do that, right?
Sure.
But in bluegrass, you'd have your head handed to you if you like as a young comer.
Right.
They just wouldn't play with you if you stepped on people.
Right. No, I totally
Rock
get that.
and roll people have volume knobs. They just get
Yeah.
loud,
Yep. The foot pedal in front of them, and they just keep pushing it down.
Yeah.
Keep hitting their overdrive button. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. At least I thought, of course I was like 19 and I was running around with much older players, so maybe if I'd been 35, I wouldn't have had that strong sense of,
Yeah.
But it was lessons well learned.
Oh, totally. So, speaking of, playing out, we toured for a while. Do you have any, and I've asked, Bobby and Jim also, do you have any good tour stories or road stories or?
Yeah, most of them are off color. It was the 70s and 80s. And,
I understand. Yeah.
But actually, there are a couple that are pretty funny. I was in a band, the band that I mentioned earlier, having gone to California to put together.
Yeah.
It was called Rodeo.
Okay.
And this was early in the country rock days. And we went from Monterey, California, up to Sandpoint, Idaho.
Okay.
When Sandpoint was much less developed than it is now. And rented a couple of houses. Or we rented one band house.
Yeah.
And a friend had another house. And we just woodshed it. And we said, okay, we got 2 months to get the tour package together.
Yep.
And it starts in January or whatever the date was. And so while we were playing there, we were taking gigs that we could get.
Sure.
And the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, PRCA Rodeo, that's the NFL of rodeos.
Okay.
And they had rodeos in Sandpoint, Idaho. They held them there. And we got to be friends with a rodeo clown who later became famous as a country western singer, a guy named Mo Bandy. And he was Bandy the Clown then. And we got to know him through these things, and we started playing the rodeos.
Oh, nice.
And what we would do is they had a big old flatbed farm truck.
Yep.
And they'd leave one side up, and they'd take the back and the other side off. And we put one ginormous A7 speaker cabinet on the cab.
Yep.
And then our vehicle would follow with the other speaker. And we had hundreds of feet of electrical cord and people roadieing this cable out while we would drive out in these funky trucks. And they'd park and we'd play our set. And then we'd knock the mics down real quick, and sort of lay over them like like Secret Service in an emergency or something. And they'd real quick unplug the speaker from on top of the other vehicle, get it down, throw it in the truck, and we'd zoom about 55, 60 miles an hour into town so that we could be set up for right after the rodeo when they came back over for the dance. It was just surreal, the whole thing. You roll in, you're electric as you're rolling in, but it's no way to play. You play your set, and it was really cool because it was really funky, old-time rodeo. The wooden bleachers and the whole deal. And then you knock your gear down, scream down the road, just by some freak and make it alive.
Right.
And
things that would not be legal today.
Yeah, and then you have the time of your life that night because those rodeo cowboys were, imagine, enthusiastic in the bar.
You can't imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was a fun.
Well, that's such a unique experience. I don't know that anyone else that has done that. Yeah.
Crazy. And
that's why I love asking people their favorite stories, because musicians have some of the craziest stories because they've traveled so much, and you're bound to encounter some sort of craziness.
And then one
really
leads
cool.
to another. And
Yep. It's so true.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's really funny.
I love it. So tell me about your CDs. What do you got here?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I suppose that's good enough for the camera.
Yeah.
Gus LeCase, so I understand, is going to come and talk to you
Yeah, we're
soon.
chatting with him later this week, next week. Yeah.
Gus and I did this record. Gus called me up. We did one gig when he was 12, and he was a fabulous player at a very young age.
Yeah, I've heard him play. He's fantastic.
Yeah, and so when he was 14, pushing 15, I think it was, he called me up and he said, I got a few gigs. I sort of thought it'd be fun to do them as duo.
Yeah.
Would you be up for it? And so I said, yeah, it sounds great. So he sent me his material, which of course was, I think of it as drinking from a fire hose, trying to learn his material, because it was just huge amounts
Complex.
of really great, complex material.
Yeah.
And the style he plays in, you don't play a song for 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, you play half a dozen songs.
Yeah, right.
And you just play snippets. So that was a lot of stuff. But it turned out to be a wonderful thing, and a handful of gigs turned into 2.5, 3 years of playing together.
Dang.
And an album that we did a couple of traditional tunes on this, but otherwise, either he wrote it or I did or we did together.
That's awesome.
And I'll do one little short instrumental that we
Cool.
both did together. I had originally written it, showed it to him. He put such a cool part on it on the record that I had to give him, write him in for the credit.
Totally.
And you'll only have to imagine his part.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
I'll
then
I'll listen to it after we're done. So
yeah, okay. And it was a fun project. We toured it for a while and had
awesome.
a great
Did you
time.
plan on doing a CD when you guys first started playing together?
Not at
or-
all. No, it was the furthest thing from our minds. But he had done a CD, and he felt he was getting beyond where he was when he had recorded it, because he was 12 or 13 when he recorded that.
Yeah.
And he was maturing fast. So he'll tell you that.
Sure.
So anyway, he wanted to do another, and I wanted to do another, and I had the gear and I had the time, so we did.
That's awesome.
And it's this is called The Forgotten Dream with Gus LeCase, and it's on Spotify, CD Baby,
But
iTunes, all the
it's
rest
better
of it.
it's better to come buy it from you in person.
But it's much better to buy it from us in person. That's right.
Yeah.
Because you may not know this, but musicians don't see much of the money when you do it through the online services.
It's true. So
especially streaming.
where can people find that if they want
Well,
to check
Gus
it out?
is probably still hawking it. We've still got a few,
Okay,
and
cool.
I am, and we're around.
Okay.
Come see us.
And we'll stick links in the
great.
description of
Okay.
the video for all this stuff too, and
Great.
and we'll get with you on that. So
And then
that's
the other
cool.
project was with Bobby Lane, who
All
you've
right.
also spoken
Yeah.
to. And Bobby and I, again, either I wrote it or she did or we did together.
That's awesome.
And that was a fun project. Bobby plays a bunch of instruments, and I
Yeah.
play a bunch of instruments. So we each played a bucket of instruments and then brought in ringers for the stuff that,
Sure.
we brought in some great local players.
That's awesome.
Jim Kaufman, and who you
Yeah.
also met.
Yeah.
Mark Bluesboy did some harp with us, and Scott Allen played drums on it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Great players.
Talked with Mark last week also.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. he's-
Again, like we were saying, this community is amazing with musicians, and
It is.
it's just really cool.
When you consider how few people there are,
Yeah.
how many of them are decent musicians and how many of them are decent people too. It's like, wow, that's a pretty good percentage.
It is. It's
kinda
really cool.
shocking.
And that's something that we were talking about too. And I can't remember if it was either Jim or Mark, but we're really fortunate here that the high school has such a good music program, because a lot of places don't have that. And we're just really lucky that these students are lucky too, that if they are passionate about that, it doesn't get wasted. It doesn't get lost.
Yeah, it's a privilege to live on this island.
It is
Because
huge.
there's that. I mean, for kids, my niece's daughter learned to sail, at the top flight
Yeah.
level for free.
Yep.
Over in Southwest Harbor. She learned how to drive, how to mush dogs,
That's so cool.
dog sleds. And, stuff like that. Most high school kids don't get that
No.
opportunity.
Nope.
And it's very cool that,
It is. It's so cool.
yeah. And kudos to the people who choose to do that with the extra resources as opposed to what else might have been done,
It's very true. Yeah, we're really happy, to be raising our kids here, and it's cool.
Yeah, it's a healthy place to be.
It is. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us. We really
fun.
appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to hearing you play. So.
Oh, good. Me too.
Yeah, we'll dip out for a second, and we'll come back and hear you sing some songs.
Sounds good to me.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
So this first tune is one that I did a couple of years ago with Gus LaCase, and I bought an old farmhouse out on Indian Point where I used to love to hang out as a kid, and crows. We got crows, and Gus and I were working on a record, and I was working on this fingerstyle tune anyway, and the crows got into this really fun argument. I tried to sort of get a little of the feel of crows bickering at each other. So this tune's called Crows in the Field. So that was Crows in the Field. And let me see. This next tune, I got married this winter to a woman that I dated when I was a teenager, and we lost track of each other for 30 some odd years and reconnected. And so while we were not connected all those years, I bumped into a friend of hers. I think I was playing in Aspen, Colorado at the time, and he came into the club we were playing, and somehow we figured out that we had a friend in common. And so anyway, that put her in my mind while I was out on that tour. We were in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and all over Montana. And, so this is a song about someone who I am lucky enough to share my life with. A long time ago in Montana, you remember a girl that you knew somewhere near Billings or Bozeman. The late sky so clear and so blue. Dance with me, move around slow. Let the world and the years fall away. Dance with me, I wish I could fly. I wish this was how we could stay. You're thinking in terms of forever, like forever's familiar to you. You can't believe you could ever forget her. Those eyes, were they gray, were they blue? Dance with me, move around slow. Let the world and the years fall away. Dance with me, I wish I could fly. I wish this was how we could stay. The moon rises over the freeway, stars peeking out through the haze. Riding that highway for hours, Montana seems different these days. You know that you never will find her. Opportunity knocks once, they say. Maybe if you had been kinder, maybe it's better this way. Dance with me, move around slow. Let the world and the dance with me. I wish I could fly. I wish this was how we could stay. Dance with me, dance with me. I wish I could fly. I wish this was how we could stay. So that was partly in Montana, partly who knows where else. Yeah, I heard you in there. So this next song is about cycles and changes and somehow getting through them all. I wrote the song 2 or 3 economic downturns ago, and thought that it was the biggest one that I would deal with in my lifetime. And that made me think of the Great Depression, and all of us have relatives that had to get through that, and most of them did. We, as a country, we survived. As a family, we survived. So that sort of inspired this song. It's called Let It Rain. Tenant farmer, 1933. He would have been about as old as me. Things just seemed to dry up everywhere. Scratching crops out of oaky dust. Half a tractor turned to rust. Grandpa kept on working anyway. Let it rain, rain. Oh Lord, if you're listening, let it rain. Grandma did with what she could, kids and chores and firewood. Nothing in the pantry much those days. She worked herself to skin and bones, tried to make that shack a home. When she felt like breaking, she would say, let it rain, rain. Oh Lord, if you're listening, let it rain. Times got better, the kids survived, made new families and brand new lives, learned to make a living other ways. I went back looking for their place, long since torn down, not a trace. Sat down in the rocks and weeds and it rained. Oh, it rained, rained. Grandpa, you should have seen it, how it rained. Oh, it rained, rained. Better late than never. How it rained. Let it rain. So, when I was 8 years old, I bought a guitar from my 2 oldest brothers, who were 9 and 10 years older than I was. And they had bought it mail order from Montgomery Ward, I think. And at the time, that was a pretty common thing. That was a real heyday of the Western cowboy on TV and reruns and Saturday matinees and all that stuff. So you could buy guitars with cowboy themes on them. They might be, one of them I'll describe a couple in the song, but they'd have a picture, just a Western picture, that spray paint on your guitar for an extra $5-10. And the guitar I had didn't have that. Instead, it had the spray paint wood grain, where they used a pretty cheap piece of wood and they made it look a little better by pretending it had fancier wood grain to it. But cowboy guitars were a thing. They were a big thing for me. And so I wrote a song about them not too long ago. And my good pal Bobby Lane and I did a record, and we were hoping to do another one soon. And this one, I imagine, will probably find its way onto that one. I got my first guitar mail order. At the time, they were every boy's dream. We were all cowboy stars when we played those guitars, painted on wild western scenes. Now there's one with two cowpokes together by the light of a painted campfire. After long days of roping them dogies, they're singing out under the stars. What a lady, what a lady. And on this one's a pair of young sisters, just bursting with wild prairie charm, laughing and singing together, those boys on that other guitar. And they sing the old songs by the campfire, songs you don't hear much these days, about chuck wagons under the moonlight, day after day after day. Now the long wagon train is winding, snaking its way toward the sun, while the wranglers keep it all moving. The cowpuncher's work's never done. What a lady, what a lady. Some of us kept them forever, some were lost to the passing of time. Some of them went to collectors, I don't know what happened to mine. But they'll all sing together forever in the paint on those cowboy guitars. Harmonies reaching the heavens for all time on those cowboy guitars. Harmonies reaching the heavens for all time on those cowboy guitars. What a lady, what a lady. Cowboy guitars. Thank you, Criterion Theatre, The View from 32. Chuck and Taylor and everybody that works here and the behind-the-scenes crew. Keep her going. We need you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to A View from 32. Taylor and I are sure glad that you're all joining us here with this venture. We're talking to some great musicians. We're going to have just a wonderful lineup of stories and locations to show you, and we hope we can grow this into something really nice. I want to start my bit today with just a little bit of what was going on back in 1932. In 1932, the economy continued to deteriorate and unemployment increased further to 24%. Not quite where we're at. There were few jobs and many ordinary Americans were forced into living in streets or in old cars. Towards the end of the year in November, the American voter used the power of democracy to show Herbert Hoover what they thought of his term of presidency during these bad times and voted strongly in favor of Franklin D. Roosevelt by 472 electoral votes to 59. Changes also occurred around the world when Britain jailed the Indian nationalist leader Mahatma Gandhi, kind of setting off that whole transition. Also in Britain, the first ever splitting of the atom occurred. And in Russia, major problems with the agricultural policy caused mass starvation and death. So times they may change, but boy, the past sure has an echo. I'll tell you, the cost of living back in 1932, the average cost of a gallon of gas was 10 cents. Pork and beans were 5 cents a can. You get a chuck roast at 15 cents a pound. And the average price of a house, $450. Now, wouldn't that bring you just a little bit of a joy finding something like that? And, I have been thinking a lot lately about joy in my readings of poetry and my experiences of life. And I every day I keep coming to the sense that if I can find that moment of joy, that beautiful wave, that one thing that you reach out and you accept in and you really take into yourself and just try and understand the beautifuln's of it and the joy of it and hold that for a moment, boy, that brings me so much relief sometimes. And I've got a lovely reading from Khalil Gibran. You may know him as the author of The Prophet. Wonderful wordsmith, wonderful sentiment and intent with his writings. This speaks of joy in sorrow. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the selfsame well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say, joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come. When one sits alone with you at your board, remember the other is asleep in your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall. Thank you very much. We're really going to try and build this out to a lovely thing every week with you. I am certainly not the brightest bulb in the marquee, but I'll be here to do my bit. Thank you so much, and thanks for watching A View from 32.